THC is the part of the chemical that is. So they're talking about CBD because a lot of states CBD is legal.
Okay, I'll accept that. Thank you. No, that's cool. That's cool. So at the end of the semester, when someone says, "What did you learn from us?" Carl with a K. No, that's cool. I appreciate that. Gensler believes cultural relativism would make us uncritical about the norms of society. So all of these criticisms that he puts forward against relativism is an attempt to establish absolute values. He's right and he's wrong, and we have to understand the context in which he's talking. Democratic societies, we can complain and change it as much as we want if we can get enough steam going in the same direction. In a totalitarian system, we can't. Now, how about moral diversity? How do we respond to moral diversity between societies? Ima rejects the dogmatic that we're right and they're wrong, and she stresses the need to understand the other side from their point of view. Ima says neither side can be wrong. Well, what do we do with the German Nazi experiment, or any other experiment that has a complete disregard for human life at some level or another? Those who believe in objective values see the matter differently. No culture has a monopoly on the truth. Different cultures need to learn from each other. Learning about other cultures can help us to correct our cultural biases and move closer to the truth about how we ought to live. How about objections to objective values? The objective view holds that some things are objectively right or wrong independently of what anyone may feel or think. That's key. That gives no room for any objection. Okay? The relativist may say, well, you can't find out what those objective values are. That may well be true. But the moral, realistic view, the objective view, says there's some things that are true regardless of what anybody thinks about them. Your culture can be 180 degrees and opposite to what the objective truth is, and it doesn't change the objective truth. Everybody could disagree with it. Every culture could say there's no way that's objectively real, and it could still be objectively real. So your agreement does not change the reality of objective truth. It just means whether you see the reality of it or whether you don't. Does everybody understand that as well? Okay. And Gensler is going to go on to say that in a culture you may well discover objective truth, but it's just personal to your culture. So the fact that it's a cultural value doesn't mean it's not an objective value. But he will say that objective values are objective universally, even if a culture adopts it as their own value system. So he makes a clear distinction you need to understand when you get to your quiz. 3/4 of your quiz are going to be on Gensler. So you really need to understand this. Don't get confused with my comments. You read through the blue and you'll understand what Gensler's saying. His argument has strength, his argument has weakness. Understand the strength and the weakness, but at least understand his argument when you take your quiz. Everybody with me on that?
And that video you have, that's on there too.
And the video was on there too. This video, I think it's going to come up right here. If you just do that, that explains it real quickly. It's just 3 little slides to explain. Now, in addition to that, I need 5 minutes to talk to you about David Hume. David Hume is a British philosopher who's what we call an empiricist, and he's also a perceptionist. David believes that the only truth we can ever come to is what we come to through our perceptions. For instance, what color is this? How many of you think this is red? What? Is that red too? I don't have any other red to give you. Well, thank you. I know. Is that red? Is that the same red as, what's your name? I'm not asking you to say anything. I just want you to, is that the same red? Are these all the same red? And what's going to happen is Hume will say that our perceptions help us to understand reality. And because our perceptions are hardwired into us, we have no choice but to encounter reality through our perceptions. Once we have a perception of something, we try and give meaning to it. So he's going to come to morality. He's going to say, let's just say someone steals from a store. So we look at the facts. We look at the toy. We look at this and we look at that. And he said there's nothing about the facts that becomes a moral quality. They're just facts. There's a knife. There's a dead person, and there's a person who's not dead. There's an apartment, there's blood on the floor. And he will say, just looking at the facts, there's no way to judge the morality of what you see. Was it self-defense? Was it premeditated murder? He says you can't get to that. What happens, he says, is your perceptions give you information, and then you begin to think about it, you begin to reason about it, and some facts are morally objectionable and other facts become morally acceptable. But it's not from the facts. The perceptions color how we see things, and based on that coloring, then our reasoning begins to interpret. So if you're doing 12 Angry Men, you have 12 white men. One of them, by the way, is Hispanic. If you watch the movie long enough, he objects to the idea, well, he's from the wrong side of the track. There's no good about any of them. One guy says, well, I came from the wrong end of the tracks. So they're bringing their biases, they're bringing their perspective. This is what we call subjectivity. Every human being has a perspective. You can't change it. And it's not the same for everybody. That's what Hume is basing it on. What happens then is once we get our perspective, once we see what's going on, then we employ reason and we try and give meaning to it. And he says, therefore, morality can't ever be universal because it's grounded in subjectivity. And we all see things differently. Well, what does he leave out of the equation? What did we say human behavior is based on? Not facts. We said it's based on a motive that gives rise to an action that produces a consequence. How many of you can see motive? Can you see motive? What's my motive today? Or if you were in class when my boss came in, see the lecture I gave you guys and the lecture I gave the class after you, and then I gave one on Tuesday, was that the same lecture? The same material. What was my motive? I wore pink that day. I did. And she responded to it right away. Did that color her vision? Well, she certainly saw pink. She said, you look really good in pink. I said, thank you. Did that color her perspective at all? Because there was another, happened to be a female, an adjunct, who was in the room when my boss came in and saw that, and she says, the other lady says, only strong men wear pink. I thought, really? Maybe I should go into class that way, and give a lecture. Two perspectives. 32 perspectives. Hume says as long as we're stuck in perspectivity or subjectivity, the morality we come to is what we call an apperception. It's the way we perceive things. So we have laws that we'll go over in this class. Stand your ground laws, castle laws, duty to retreat laws. And we're going to get that all wrong. Stand your ground, we're going to get that all wrong. It comes with limitations, it comes with certain things that have to occur before you can justify your behavior. It's not based on how you perceive it. Well, that's not quite true. In the daytime, for you to use deadly force, you have to perceive what's called imminent danger. What does imminent mean? Imminent means right now, that someone is trying to kill you. Imminent danger. Well, you're 6'8" and I'm 5'2", and you say you're going to squeeze my head into a bubble. Well, saying that doesn't harm me, but this knee does not go backwards. It takes about 4 pounds of force, and the fight's over. You can't fight on one leg. Am I forced to use deadly force to defend myself against someone 6'8" and I'm 5'2"? Well, the law is very clear. How do we perceive the law? And that's why we have courts to figure it out, because it's not as clear as we think it is. So anyway, the point about Hume is this. If you have pencils, I would take it out. I want to give you 3 thoughts to write down. Or if you can remember these are okay too. I know, I'm making you work. Most of you don't have to because I don't call on you, but you might want to write these down. Number 1. According to Hume, all of our perceptions, how we see things, are either impressions, how things are impressed on us, or they produce ideas in us. So the harvest moon, when it comes up, gigantic and orange. I'm sorry, say that again.
Say it again.
I can. According to Hume, all of our perceptions, how we perceive things, are either impressions, how the object impresses us, or the ideas that it gives us. So say what?
You're talking really fast. Very slow.
Slow down. Okay. According to Hume, all of our perceptions, and perceptions then are Yeah, it's going to be in here. But I'm going to have you focus on 3 things that are important to you. I'm just a nice guy. Are either impressions or ideas. What does he mean by that? Everybody got that down, or should I mean, I'm okay with repeating it. We're okay now? Okay. What does he mean by that? So you go, have you ever seen the harvest moon? You go outside and see a harvest moon, and it is gigantic and orange on the horizon. It's like, you got to be kidding me. And then a little time goes by, and it rises a little higher in the sky, and it gets a little smaller, and it starts out orange, and then it turns out yellow, and then it gets up to what we call the apex, the height in the sky, and it turns smaller and white. And it turns out it's not orange, it's not yellow, and it's not white, it's gray. But there's something about the atmosphere and the density of it at the horizon, less dense, that changes the size. It's like a magnifying glass, and changes the coloration to it. That's what Hume means by perceptions. When you see things, because we are subjects, it automatically is filtered through our perceptions that produce ideas or impressions on our mind.
For that argument, you say the sky isn't actually blue.
That's right, the sky isn't blue. That's right, it appears blue till you get out in space. Yeah, same thing, absolutely. No, that's right. Number 2, according to Hume, therefore, moral claims express attitudes, or what he calls sentiments, towards objects. So if we see certain class of people as being a lower class, well, we might think they're more prone to crime than someone who isn't in that appearance to us. So he says it's the appearance of things that influence the way we reason about morality. And finally, Hume thinks all of our ideas then come from perceptions. We see the world, it gives an impression to us, and therefore our morality is based on how we see the world, not the way the world really is. And it makes a huge difference within the moral framework of how we live with one another. So does anyone need those repeated? Densler is probably the most difficult to understand, only because he's across the board in some areas, people. Okay? If you have no questions for me, red light, green light. If you came in late, let me know you're here, please.